So, guys, I may have been a little bit hasty in my criticism of the new Yamaha R9. And to be fair, my criticism is based in my own prejudice. When it comes to motorcycles that look like the R9 and that have the electronics suite that it comes with, which is straight off of the R1, I actually kind of had some expectations of what that CP3 could have been in that motorcycle. I think a lot of folks looked at it and thought, God, it's not making 130, 140 horsepower. What a failure. But there's something that I didn't quite grasp at the time when that motorcycle's specs were released, and that is who the target audience is for that motorcycle. So let's chat about that part of it, because that's really, if you think about it, where the genius lies with this bike. You see, the hypersports middleweight motorcycles are basically falling out of favor with most motorcycle buyers. The GSXR 750 notwithstanding, hyperactive 600cc motorcycles just don't really sell nearly as well as they used to. But there is a class of bikes that does sell exceptionally well. Motorcycles like the Triumph Daytona 660, the CBR 650, the Aprilia Tuono 660. You've got the GSX 8R and the R7. These are all motorcycles that are right at or just below 100 horsepower, and they're around that 600-ish cc range. Some a little bit larger like the GSX 8R, but it's a parallel twin just like the R7. The point that I'm making here is that riders aren't graduating up from a hyper sports motorcycle anymore. Quite frankly, they're graduating up from what might be considered an A2 or at least an A2 compliant motorcycle. These are bikes that aren't crazy fast. They don't rev to the moon. They offer up a nice riding experience, but one that is going to usher you into sport bike riding, not one that's going to have you jump cannonball style into the deep end the way that like a ZX6 might. So when the riders of those types of motorcycles need to upgrade, what would they upgrade into? Well, quite frankly, there was nothing for your A2 compliant rider to graduate into after they've had that motorcycle tuned for maximum performance. Well, now there is. The R9 scratches that itch, and motorcycles that'll come out that are like that bike, like the RCR from KTM, and maybe other manufacturers begin to follow suit. Fully fared motorcycles in the 900cc class that are making around 120 to 130 or so horsepower are going to be the ideal bike for those guys to graduate up to, especially when you consider that to go any higher than the R9 puts you in leader class motorcycle territory. And let's be honest, that horsepower is absolutely crazy. I mean, this is insanity on two wheels when you get into the leader class motorcycle, but something about the R9 and bikes that will come like it just seem to be a lot more friendly. And let's look at it from this point of view. It will allow you the opportunity to enjoy the motorcycle in a sporting manner. You can get that thing on the side of the tire. You've got a lot of rider aids that can bail you out if things get a little bit overly spirited, and that means that the safety aspect is there. You see, all of that electronic suite, the rider modes, the programmable modes, the launch control, the 6-axis IMU, these are all safety features, not track augmentations. If you think of them like that, that makes this motorcycle incredibly attractive. Add to that, it's the CP3 for crying out loud. It's loved by everybody that's ever ridden a bike powered by it, makes a lot of torque. And the fun thing about a CP3 engine is that it does act bigger than its displacement through about 80% of its power band. It's a really fun, peppy engine in a really good bespoke, mind you, chassis in the R9. See, the R9 doesn't share, although it does share a lot of components, it doesn't share the main portions of the chassis with the MT09 or the XSR 900. So in that, you get a proper sport bike with clip-on handlebars, a great electronic suite, handling to go along with some fantastic looks, and an engine that will keep you entertained. That is what this motorcycle is promising to offer. And for the returning motorcyclist that wants something that is not leader class power, because who can really use 200 horsepower anymore these days? But realistically don't want hyper sports class power either. They don't want that type of power delivery. You want something that's going to deliver a lot of power at partial throttle. You want something that's going to be extremely responsive throughout the throttle range. There isn't an engine that does it better, I think, than the CP3 right now. So that's the great part of this bike. So for the time being, we don't really have any that are hitting the street. But there's one other thing I would like to throw out there too. You know, the CP3 is going to be, at least initially, released at an advertised 117 horsepower and 68 pound-feet of torque. In the MT-09, it has not shown signs that it really adapts well to tuning and exhausts and things like that. But I believe that this motorcycle may change that perception. And the reason why I say that is because this engine is now in a different chassis, which means it could have a different airbox. Different airbox means different resonance for that engine. And could it be that they're sandbagging a little bit with this CP3 and the R9? Maybe. Or could it be that this new airbox allows that CP3 to really respond to tuning and filter changes and exhaust? That's the exciting part of it, because if this motorcycle, when it hits the streets, and again, it's roughly 440 pounds wet, at just shy of 120 horsepower, it starts to sound a lot like the original 900cc class motorcycles from back in the 90s. Think CBR 900 or 929 here. If this bike could be tuned with an exhaust that would actually mimic the exhaust that those motorcycles came with from the factory and make, say, 125, 130 horsepower to the rear wheel. Now we're talking about a true throwback style motorcycle with all of the electronics that you might need to keep you safe, an engine that is very responsive down low that will pull you through corners but not be overwhelming as far as power goes on the top end. This might be the absolute best motorcycle for a complete host of riders, both experienced, track-oriented, street warriors, and for the guys that are graduating up. I don't know who wouldn't enjoy this bike. I think it's going to be a huge seller, and at $12,500-ish, it hits a price point right where it needs to. Guys, I'm really looking forward to this bike. I slept on it, and I think that I've come to a completely different conclusion with this bike. But listen, that's just my opinion. Y'all post up your comments. Let me know what you're still thinking about that bike, and we will catch you on the next one. That is a wrap.